In a country drowning in corporate money, in a state where Democrats have stopped showing up, one guy keeps lacing up his cleats and hitting the road.
I'm a baseball playing, Monopoly busting, beer drinking, Bible reading, working class, proud Prairie Populist from right here in Sioux City.
J.D. Scholten is a former baseball pitcher turned Prairie Populist who nearly took down Steve King in a plus 27 Trump district. And now he's coming for Joni Ernst.
And then the third thing was when Joni Ernst said at that town hall, "We're all going to die." And I was on my way to a funeral at that time that actually Senator Harkin, who used to have the seat, he was attending as well.
It's smart, it's urgent, and it's not your average campaign interview. Listen to Dispatch Revolution wherever you get your podcasts, or go to dispatchrevolution.substack.com to subscribe, because the future won't win itself.
Last summer, I had an opportunity at 44 years old to play professionally again in an emergency pitching start with less than 3 hours notice. After the team gave up 34 combined runs the two nights before, the starting pitcher got injured, and so they were desperate, and I cannot emphasize desperate enough. And I went and pitched 6 2/3, got the win. It's, why do one thing that's completely all-encompassing that you're passionate about when you can do two, I guess.
Dispatch Revolution sits down with J.D. Scholten. And we are rolling. J.D. Scholten, welcome to Dispatch Revolution. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yes, right on. So let's get into it, man. I think a lot of our listeners know that I was an elected official in Iowa for a number of years. You and I have known each other for a number of years. I've gotten to know you as one of the best campaigners in Iowa politics, and a person who is really able to go into deep red districts and invite conversation in a meaningful way and bring people along with you. Now, national Democrats, of course, are really hoping to figure out how they can do that in areas across the country. And I imagine with your announcement that you're running for the United States Senate against Joni Ernst is piquing a lot of interest, because folks want to know, how can we win in these red districts? How can we win in these purple districts? So with that, JD, I'm going to kick it over to you. If you just want to spend a few minutes letting our viewers, our listeners know who you are and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, so I will say part of the reason why I've had success of welcoming people into our coalition is when I ran against Steve King for Congress in 2018, I didn't have the privilege of just talking to Democrats in order to win. There's 80,000 more registered Republicans in the district. Trump won the district by 27. And so we ultimately lost by 3 points. But in doing so, we led with our values and then welcomed people into our coalition. And so, but for folks who may not know about me, the simplest way is the way I describe myself is I'm a baseball playing, Monopoly busting, beer drinking, Bible reading, working class, proud Prairie Populist from right here in Sioux City. And so a huge part of my identity just in life has been baseball. Last summer, I had an opportunity at 44 years old to play professionally again in an emergency pitching start with less than 3 hours notice. After the team gave up 34 combined runs the two nights before, the starting pitcher got injured, and so they were desperate, and I cannot emphasize desperate enough. And so at 44, I've been playing all summer long, playing amateur ball, and I went and pitched 6 2/3, got the win because I'm the oldest pitcher in league history and the only state elected official to play professional baseball at the same time. My jersey's in the National Baseball Hall of Fame. And
That is so cool.
That's kind of a weird thing about all this, but and I'm still playing professionally. It's our team is the Sioux City Explorers, first place in the American Association, and it's why do one thing that's completely all-encompassing that you're passionate about when you can do two, I guess. So
I love to hear it. I love to hear it. And that feels like the story of my life in terms of why do one hard thing when you can do 10 hard things?
Why do one thing you don't get paid for, but you're very passionate for, when you can do two things you don't get really paid for? I'm just kidding.
Exactly, man. Well,
Yeah.
look, I'm not a huge baseball guy, but I've done a little bit of my research, and everyone I've talked to, they say you're a pretty serious athlete. Pete D'Alessandro, he's an Iowa political operative. I'm sure you're aware. He follows sports with reckless abandon, and I've heard him say really wonderful things about you. So it's cool, man. I think part of what makes your race interesting is that you are showing the world once again that a politician doesn't have to be one thing,
Right.
right? In that the best politicians are people with real working class lived experiences who are bringing their experiences of being in the world to their campaigns and to elected office. I think that's really, really cool.
I
But
appreciate
let
it.
me ask you this to really get into it. So you mentioned running against Steve King. It was a plus 27 Trump district,
Yeah.
and you came within striking distance. I mean, that in and of itself is a phenomenal accomplishment. And now you're looking at this race, right? So you've been in hard races before where you have to take your prairie populism, as you've called it, into red districts. Why? Why this race against Joni Ernst, and why now?
Well, so I learned a lot being in the state house the past few years, but the things that I'm extremely passionate about, whether it's the farm economy, because a whole reason I got into politics, my grandmother on her deathbed said, you have to take care of the farm. And a month later was her funeral, and the month after that was the Trump first inauguration. And the next day I went to the Women's March in Seattle. I was living out there at the time and just felt that raw power and energy. And so a lot of the things that I'm extremely passionate about, whether it's universal health care, fixing the economy so it works for everyone, not just the billionaires, fighting for a farm bill that's competitive, that like right now it's just get bigger, get off the farm, all these things. And then the other aspect of this is securing our democracy from the special interests and the billionaires that are dictating it right now. All those things are at the federal level. And as much as I love being at the state capitol and I cherish representing Sioux City, I feel that the federal level is where we really need the change in this country and dictates a lot of these things. This race in particular was not on my radar at the beginning of the year, but there's three things that really stood out. The first was at the Trump inauguration when you had those four tech billionaires sitting front row. That is very significant to me because to me, they all paid to be there. And this pay to play system that's happening in this administration is absolutely disgusting. And I think of this Judge Brandeis quote that really shapes a lot of my politics. It says, we have a decision to make. We can have wealth concentrated in the hands of a few, or we can have a democracy, but we cannot have both. And that is very meaningful to me. And then the second thing that happened was the trade tariffs. And just we know that that's going to devastate our rural economy and our agriculture economy. And then the third thing was when Joni Ernst said at that town hall, we're all going to die. And I was on my way to a funeral at that time that actually Senator Harkin, who used to have the seat, he was attending as well for just sitting there trying to honor Gary Lipschutz while thinking about Senator Harkin's legacy, while trying to juggle what Joni just said and just all that combined. And that's where I felt it was a bit of a calling. And so
Yeah.
we jumped in the
Wow.
race that Monday. And the very next day, because we got in the race, they changed the rating from it being a safe Republican seat to lean Republican, which is a
That's
big deal this
significant.
early on here in
Yeah.
Iowa.
That's significant.
Not, they are not eligible, so they will be coming off. So we, people are not, well, we all are going to die. So for heaven's sakes, folks, okay, no, but
What I know about you, JD, is that you have progressive values. That, anytime I've been in an audience where you're, giving a speech, you are talking about the things that, other national progressives are talking about. The reason I bring this up is because I think there is a conventional logic in mainstream politics that progressive values don't play well in rural areas, don't play well in conservative areas. But time and again, you have campaigned in these areas. You have amassed quite a following. You have won. You currently are a state senator. How are you making this work? What's the secret?
Well, the thing that I get frustrated with is I hate labels. Like I'm a 6'6" guy, but I think I'm a point guard or a shortstop. Like I've just in sports I hate labels, in politics I hate labels. And when you don't when you lead with what you stand for rather than just putting a label on it, I think that's the way that you can welcome people in. Because I've had people who after my congressional campaigns are like, "You're the most progressive candidate we've had here in the 4th district." I've had other people say, "Oh, because you're moderate, we got behind you." It's just like when you don't define necessarily who you are, you welcome you allow people to kind of believe what they want to believe. But at the end of the day, if you're true to yourself, I think that goes a long way. And I feel like I mentioned earlier prairie populism and the lineage of prairie populism here in the Midwest. You have the Paul Wellstones, the Harkins, the Berkeley Bedells. Those are the types of people that I feel Democrats should be after, especially when you're here in the Midwest. And you have that coalition, that working class, that farmer, that rural urban connection. I think that's the thing that we should really strive to be. And so as much as I fight Republicans, I'm also fighting Democrats about what we should be doing here, because you look at maps, especially the Senate map, and is it growing or is it shrinking? And that's where I get very frustrated with the national Democrats who are trying to define like what is an Iowa Democrat, or should we invest in this state or not? And like if we're not growing the map, then we're only playing to at best get 50 senators, it feels like. And that is not a recipe for winning. And what are we doing to get back working class voters, especially here in Iowa? It's so frustrating. And so a lot of this is, I think there's this concept too that you got to get Republicans to vote Democrats in order to win in Iowa. And I don't think, I mean, that would help, but I don't think that's the winning math. The math is getting people who are not engaged to get them engaged and on our team. And so one of the blessings I've had front running at the federal race and now the state house the past couple election cycles, I do more door knocking and have a deeper a connection with my constituents because I don't have to be in 39 counties. I only have to be on the western part of Sioux City. And the things that I tend to target are the B's and the S's, the barbers, the bartenders, the baristas, the servers, and the stylists, because they all are working class people who talk to other people. And that's how we should be targeting a lot of these races, is what is should be on our team, and who are people who are their own kind of local validators, and let's get them on board. And that's something that I wish the Democratic Party would do a lot more of.
So you're talking about, investing in mainstream America, working America, bringing that message to that particular segment of the electorate, and then elevating their concerns, in your campaign. Do you feel like, I mean, obviously, it seems as though you feel like the National Democratic Party could do a better job there.
Oh my goodness, yes.
What does that look like? So you're running a federal race right now. What does it look like? So you go into these spaces, you talk to these folks. What are some of the things that, you're hearing? What are some of the policies that seem to be resonating that maybe, Democrats across the country can take a page out of your playbook and learn from?
I think there's a couple things. One, there's been this notion since I've been running for office since about 2017, especially at the federal level, my first two federal campaigns. There was this notion that, oh, what is that thing, that rural electrification, like back in the day? That's why so many people were Democrats back in the day, because Democrats were the one who brought electricity out to these rural communities. And for the longest time, you have these DC consultants that just, oh, we got to talk about broadband. That's the big connection. Broadband. They can do all this stuff. Yeah, broadband's great. And like we should have it across the lands and everything. But the game changer is universal health care. When I ran for Congress in a very conservative area, I talked to farmers who would always vote for me and ones who never vote for me and everywhere in between. And they were in the middle of 5 consecutive years of low commodity prices. That means their bank accounts were very thin. And the number one thing that they all brought up and consistently was the fact that they had to work off the farm or get that second or third job, or their spouse would have that second or third job just to pay for health care. And to me, universal health care is such a, like, we're the wealthiest country in the world. It is crazy that we do not have this. This is something we should almost be rioting over because of the cost. Venus Williams just played a tennis tournament because her previous healthcare was so expensive. She wanted to do one more so she could get on the, or whatever the tennis healthcare system is. I mean, when you have people of that stature doing that, and what did the NFL commissioner do when he renegotiated his contract? It wasn't also to get a private jet. It was so him and his family could have a lifetime of healthcare. Like, that's how crazy and luxurious healthcare
Yeah.
is at this point. So I can't
Yeah.
emphasize that enough. The other thing that I love to lead with that I think more and more people should talk about is anti-monopoly. There is such a level of corporate greed out there, and we have to call out that, because the frustrating thing for me is when I talk about this stuff, I can go into an Emmitsburg or Palo Alto County or Keokuk, and you see the people, they connect, they understand what's happening. And like, I understand, like, just saying the term anti-monopoly might be an esoteric thing, but people feel the corporate greed. And
Yeah.
when you can call it out and then they go, oh, are you a Democrat or Republican? That's where I get very frustrated, because it should be clear that Democrats stand up to corporate greed, but it's not at this point. And
Why do you
that's the
think it
thing that's
why do
really,
you think it isn't clear? This is a point I'd love to explore with you.
yeah. Well, because we still, like, in a lot of different ways, we still take money from a lot of huge corporations, and we do that line where we talk the talk at a level, and then at the other side we still take the money. And I think we need to be very clear on who we are, who we stand up against. Like, we don't take corporate PAC money. That's something that, like, I think is kind of low hanging fruit for Democrats. Like, we
Sure.
have to find a way to fund our campaigns and things we're passionate about. But at the end of the day, there's also a principled way of doing it.
Right.
And so I don't know a race in America that has lost because of corporate PAC, like not taking corporate PAC money. Now, I
Sure.
could be wrong, but
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
But your
just
point
part of it. Yeah.
Your point's well taken. It can be done. You can
Yeah.
have people-powered campaigns that are successful. Just to put a finer point on this, you know, you're one of the only candidates running that I know has prioritized talking about antitrust monopolies across the economy, not just
Yep.
the ag monopolies that we're
Exactly.
seeing that particularly impact states like Iowa. Uh, it's really, really important stuff. How, how can we make this plain for our listeners? Because I think you have a point.
Yeah.
If you engage in, high level talk around monopolies, antitrust, it may be a bit confusing. It
Right.
may not be the most accessible, but how do you draw the connection between companies that are able to form big monopolies and how it impacts everyday Iowans, everyday Americans? How do you draw that connection?
Yes, a couple different ways. One, you look at the price of eggs, and that was a huge talk over the presidential election and how they've gone up. Now, a huge part of that is because we are so concentrated in the, and I apologize, I have a northern accent, so when I say agriculture and eggs, you can kind of overlap with that. But so eggs, like the little white
The
things
things
that come out of
chickens lay.
chickens, yeah. So when the price of eggs, when they're rising, we've gotten so consolidated that if a disease goes through them, then that really hurts the overall amount that we have, the demand, or the demand's there, but the supply has really dwindled. And so that's why the price went up. Canada didn't have this issue because they decentralized. They don't have just a few corporations controlling their egg industry. So that's a huge part of this. The other issue is, so playing professional baseball, my teammate, him and his wife are trying to find a house in Florida, and the prices have just skyrocketed recently. And a huge part of that was the fact that private equity is buying a lot of homes right now. And so you're not just competing against another couple for that home, you're competing against Wall Street to buy a home. And no person, no average American is going to be able to win that fight in that price. And so that's pricing out so many middle class Americans. So those are just examples of it. But the thing that I think that I get very frustrated with is the one of the best parts of the Biden administration, and you can argue with him on many different ways, but him putting Lena Khan at the FTC and what she was able to do with the FTC when Democrats put good people in good positions, we should be highlighting that. And people from all over the political backgrounds have thought very highly of what Lena did in her jobs. I mean, you have Matt Gaetz. I'm not going to say like Democrats should listen to Matt Gaetz by any means, but he was praising what she was doing.
Mhm.
So there's
Mhm.
something there.
Yeah. So on that note, I have been having conversations with Democrats, and inevitably I'll get to something like this where I'll say, Donald Trump came into office both times around, but this his second time, this current administration has governed in a way that I've never seen before, insofar as if he wants something done, he stops at nothing until he accomplishes it. Now, most of the things he's doing are very, very bad, are very, very
Yeah.
harmful for this country and for the world. But yet and still, he's found a way to do these things.
Yeah.
I bring this up because I know that there's going to be a world without Donald Trump one day. There will be a world, and Democrats and Republicans are going to have to make a choice. Which
Yeah.
path do we want to walk? Who do we want to be? The soul of the nation argument that I think Joe Biden was trying to make. So there will come a time where that is the case. And hopefully there will come a time where we have a Democratic president and majorities in the House and Senate. Do Democrats have it in their DNA to govern in that way? I mean, I always felt like when Democrats were in power, there was always an excuse as to why they couldn't do anything. And yet they were still asking people for, $5 contributions.
Right.
And it's like, what do Democrats need to do if and when we ever get power again? How can we, I don't mean, sort of bulldoze over political norms or shred the Constitution.
Right.
But is it the case that Democrats can govern more effectively when they have
Oh,
power?
without a doubt. I mean, you look at a state like Minnesota and what they were able to do with a small majority, because 10 years before they had a majority and they played scared and then they lost the majority. And then they went bold, and Governor Walz and both the House and Senate, like I went to an event before he ran for vice president in Nebraska for try to support Nebraska Democrats. And I mean, their list was very long of what they were able to accomplish. And so I think one of the things Democrats absolutely have to do next time we're in power is put in the pillars of our democracy, the protections. So
Yeah.
regardless of who's in office, because right now it's just a pendulum back and forth. And just to undo everything the previous administration did and to go forward, I think that's a huge part of it. But yeah, there's no reason to be shy in modern politics, I feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
There's a lot
this
that needs to be done. There's a lot of
yeah,
people we
this
got to help.
this risk adverse stuff is not doing it, and people
Yeah.
don't feel it.
Yeah. It's not resonating either. I mean, the National Party, I think, there are some polls that put the favorability of Democrats in the low 20s, right?
Right.
Like that is a huge branding issue. So clearly this sort of play it safe, risk averse methodology hasn't worked.
Well, look at just like what the last administration was able to do with pharmaceutical pricing. Like it was what 12 drugs that we were able to like the fact that insulin was able to be capped, great. That's great. But like that's just a small sliver of the much larger issue.
Right.
And so like let's go for the big thing. Like
Yeah.
quit just like I don't know, going for singles, start going for home runs.
There we go. There's the baseball analogies in there that I was looking for. I want to pivot just a little bit here. We had Zach Walz on our show not too long ago. He is also running against Joni Ernst. There's another gentleman who I haven't met yet, Nathan Sage, who I know is running. And there are a couple other names I'm sure you're aware of who will likely be getting in this race, meaning it's going to be a competitive primary.
Yep.
How do you see your lane? What is your path to victory in this primary cycle? And then what is your path to victory in beating Joni Ernst in the general election?
The primary itself, you look at everybody, and we have a lot of great Democrats. That's fantastic. We should be going to every corner of the state with our message loud and proud. I'm the only one, and I'm not here to talk about anybody else. I'll just emphasize what we bring to the table. So I'm the only one who's ran for federal office. I've done that twice. I'm the only one who represents a Trump district. Trump won my current state house seat, and we were able to overperform the top of the ticket. So I've outperformed the top of the ticket in every single race. We took a district Trump won by 27 and narrowly lost by 3 points. And in that year, the governor So when I say outperformed, the governor was at this level. We were 17 points above that in the district, the person who was running for governor back then. Biden got this level. We outperformed him by 5. And this last year, we outperformed Harris's campaign by 8.5 here. So every single race, I've outperformed the top of the ticket. Being from Western Iowa, I think that's one of the ways that I've had a ton of experience, like we talked about before. I don't have a privilege of just talking to Democrats. I have to talk to everybody in order if you're going to win out here. And that's something that we have to do better. Democrats in Iowa, you look at in the state legislature, we're from, for the most part, very urban areas. How do we connect with people in rural communities and welcome them into our coalition? That's going to be a huge part. I ran for Congress in the second most agriculture producing district in the entire country. I talk a lot about agriculture because that's one. 2, my grandmother said you got to take care of the family farm. And 3, it's the largest or it's a 16-17 billion dollar industry in Iowa, and it is impactful of almost every single community, if not every single community. So those are the things that we tend to lead with.
I'm predicting this is going to be one of the most watched races of the federal election cycle. I think the primary is going to be energizing. I think it's going to get a lot of folks activated. But along with that, obviously, comes a big price tag. What is your campaign estimating this primary and general election is going to cost?
Yeah, I think primary, we're thinking around 3 to 5 million. That's kind of what we're projecting in our budget. I that like that's a competitive primary to me. For the federal or for the general, it's different. It's going to depend on a lot of different things. So like it's anywhere from like a $15-20 million race to a $100 million race plus.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't know, and there's a lot that's up in the air for that.
Yeah. Sounds like it. So how do you ensure that your message, that you're raising enough money to reach all the people you need to reach? What does, your fundraising methodology look like? And I'm not asking you to share,
No,
trade
you're
secrets
good.
here, but, how are you approaching it philosophically even?
Yeah. So kind of a day in the life of JD right now is from the minute I wake up to the minute I have to go to the baseball field every single day. It's either a meeting, a podcast, or fundraising. Then when I get to the field, I have about an hour and a half of baseball stuff. And then there's usually an hour and a half. That's usually follow-up calls. A lot of times I do in the dugout because it's one of the more quiet places. The clubhouse is a little too chaotic for that type of stuff. And then if I'm not pitching that night, there's usually a call or 2 or 10 that I have to do during the game. Like usually in between innings, I'll just go into the dugout or go into the clubhouse when everyone else is out in the field. That's kind of my life right now. And so we usually have about 1 day a week we have off, and then I load up a lot of stuff that ways. And then after our season, we have national fundraisers all across the nation lined up. And so just with my connections from running for Congress and just, being in politics the last few years, a lot of people want to help the campaign. And we're very excited about that. And we just got to capitalize on things. It's just, like I said, with 2 extremely passionate things that I'm doing right now, it's a lot.
Running for office, at times can feel a bit repetitive, mundane. What are some of the things that are happening right now that actually get you really excited, that bring you a lot of joy?
There's just daily things that just really remind you why you're doing this. And that's the thing that keeps me motivated. Like I was on the call with a constituent. She had an issue with medical stuff that I just connected her with the right folks. Cause like a lot of our constituent services at the state level, it's not so much like me having the answer. It's just connecting them with the right agency and the right people for a lot of stuff. And that's very meaningful. And, just you hear these stories and just a lot of people from my previous campaigns, like showing up to an event and just saying, I was not involved in politics or I was jaded with politics, but I came and heard you speak and just you motivated me to do more. That's the thing that just really is exciting, and the amount of volunteers we have already, like that's the type of stuff that, we had thousands of volunteers in my congressional campaigns, like just amazing amount of support. And a huge part of that was people hated Steve King, and rightfully so. But a lot of people are still wanting to do all they can to help us and to change what's happening here in Iowa. And that's the stuff that, to me, like just melts my heart and like keeps you motivated, because there's a lot of times where you're just like after a 10-hour bus ride, you get home at you try to sleep on the bus, you get home at 6 a.m, and I have call time at 9 or 9:30 in the morning, and it's a grind, and you're struggling, and you're drinking as much coffee as possible, but you really try to find that motivation, and that's where those stories really hit home and just lights that fire.
What's a political movement or political personality that is really inspiring you right now?
Just like the old school personalities. So we were playing down in Texas recently, and I did a couple events with Jim Hightower. And for folks who don't know who Jim Hightower is, he's the last statewide Democrat in Texas. He was the agriculture commissioner down there, and just he considers himself America's #1 populist. And he's a hoot. He's full of one-liners, and just and doing a couple events with him, just really inspiring, and the people that he connected us to, and hearing their stories about, like, they're talking about how they've been with Jim since '82 or something like that. Those are the things that you see, like when you have a special campaign, and it's more than just that election cycle. It is that feeling of belonging and feeling of fighting. And I feel like that's something that Democrats have gotten away a little bit from. Like, how many campaigns that when they close shop for either they win or lose, and you just move on, like how many like have that feeling of, man, we did something special there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the thing that you see.
I think there's a collective nostalgia among Democrats for the kind of, populist movement, populist politician that we remember. I think, for what it's worth, Barack Obama ran a populist presidential campaign in 2008. Whether he governed as such, I think is up for
Fair.
debate
Yep.
and should be scrutinized. I think Bill Clinton in 92 ran a populist campaign. The great Tom Harkin, Senator Harkin, Prairie Populists. So I think there is a collective nostalgia for that kind of Democrat, where in my amateur assessment, you don't see so much anymore, because earlier in our conversation, we were essentially talking about how both political parties have been captured by, the big donors and the wealthy class, which makes a lot of those populist ideas, incompatible with the aims and wishes of the wealthy elite. And, you've used the word prairie populist or populism several times now in this conversation. What does it mean? What does populism mean? And why are you focusing in on it in this really important race that you're running?
I mean, and just to add one more, like what Jesse Jackson was able to do in his run,
The Rainbow Coalition.
And that's something that I think, then looking back, like I was too young to really remember that, but to hear the stories of the people who I really cherish around here talk about that campaign seems pretty significant as well. And so prairie populism and populism in general, the reason I'm a Democrat is because I stand up to bullies. That's bottom line. And I feel right now there are far too many huge corporations that have all the power and are bullying, whether it's workers bullying us as consumers, with everything from like the meatpacking industry that is suppressing workers and making consumers pay the most they ever have, to what big tech is doing on just like consumer data and things like that. And with the pricing, like Delta Airlines just came out saying that the price of a flight is not just $300. It's what they think you will maximize pay for it. And so like that is like, who's fighting for us in a lot of this stuff. And that's ultimately what populism, and there is this faux populism on the other side But at the end of the day, like, who's giving the tax breaks to these huge corporations? It's not
Right.
Democrats. I'll say that. It's these Republicans. And I think one of the biggest things that just drives me insane is how the Democratic Party lost here in Iowa to Trump, a New York billionaire, and they didn't call out him for being a New York billionaire. Like that, like when Democrats lose the economic populist message, we lose races. No doubt about that. Now we can win and still lose a race, but I feel if you don't win that message, you don't stand a chance.
Yeah. Yeah. What's at stake for Iowa and the country as we look at, this midterm election cycle? You're running against Joni Ernst. What are the stakes? How do we help Iowans and the rest of our, brothers and sisters across the country? How do we help them understand the significance of this race and other races that are going to be happening next year?
Yeah. So as a Democrat, what's at stake, I feel in Iowa is 2026 is the year Democrats in Iowa have the back against the wall. We're geographically between Wisconsin and South Dakota. We are politically between Wisconsin and South Dakota. Now, are we going to go back to being purple like Wisconsin, or are we going to go to more being like a strong red like South Dakota? Now, what's at stake for just everyday Iowans? There's a ton. And it is about just the Iowa way of life. Like, it has changed so dramatically in the last 10, 15, 20 years. Our farm economy is becoming an extractive economy. Manufacturing is just a shell of what it used to be. And we're hearing in the last year and a half more and more layoffs when it comes to that. Jobs are being shipped overseas because they're being incentivized to ship overseas. Like, we have to change what's happening in our federal vision in overall, but like also within the state. Like, we have one of the worst economies in the whole entire country. And what are we doing to change that? And to me, the heartbeat of Iowa is agriculture. And what are we doing in the farm bill? Because right now it's get big or get off the farm. And it has devastated a lot of our rural communities. It's devastated a lot of our manufacturing. There's no competition. And so the things that I want to do is add more conservation to the farm bill, add more competition to the farm bill, and add regional food systems. All of those leads to more jobs in Iowa, more manufacturing, more opportunity for farmers to get a better price, and for consumers to have more options of healthier local food. The one last thing I'll just mention with this is in the farm bill, only 4% of the entire funding goes towards fruits and vegetables, that things that we eat every single day. And meanwhile, they tell us to eat 50% of our meals should be fruits and vegetables.
Right.
Like, think of that just disconnect. What
Yeah.
what are we doing? Where are we putting our money? Where our mouth is? Literally and figuratively.
Yeah, right on. What's a book or a movie that changed the way you think about the world?
I mean, I'll just do in his own words, the Harold Hughes story.
Talk to us about who that is.
So
what
Howard
makes
Hughes,
him an inspiring
he was
politician.
He was a Democrat from here in Western Iowa that went on to become governor and senator in Iowa, and he overcame his alcohol addiction in order to do that. And he was just an everyday Iowan that I think a lot of folks connected with. And back then, being an alcoholic for most people ended your political career, but he leaned into it at a time when it wasn't as necessary to do it. Here, I got another book too. This is a Paul Wellstone book, How the Rural Poor Got Power. I don't know. These are the ones that are on my desk. So
lovely. What's a question you wish more journalists or voters would ask you?
Ooh, man, that's a good question. The voters, I think ultimately it's more like why do you believe the things you do? Because we talk about the things, but like why? And I think a lot of Democrats I've seen, they hear these catchphrases, but like, why do you believe in that? Yeah. And that's an interesting thing. So at the end of my 2018 race, I went on Chris Hayes' show, and he just threw this away at the end, and we were talking somehow, I think, about healthcare or something like that. And the clip's somewhere on the internet, and he just goes, well, you can't run on, in your district, you can't run on Medicare for all. And I go, I am running on Medicare for all because the farmers, but if I describe why I am, farmers don't have employer health insurance. Most of the other businesses are small businesses. They don't have a lot of opportunity to have employer health insurance or to allow their employees to have that. And it's one of the biggest costs to these small businesses. So what are we doing for them? So like, rather than just blanketly saying like some of these things, like I think the why is really important.
I agree. And JD, we could have an entire podcast episode about this. One of my biggest criticisms that I levied toward establishment Democrats, particularly those running for office, was that they didn't explain the why.
Yeah.
And they were using that very short math, and my respects to Chris Hayes, but they were using that short math. Oh, you're in a red district. You can't talk about this progressive policy. And I said, and I've always said, and I continue to write about this, Democrats are going to start to win again when they can explain the why, when they can show their work, when they can say, this is why this matters. This is why you don't need to be afraid of things like Medicare for all, because it's impacting you. And maybe you don't know it because the other team is out there telling you this is scary, we can't do it. But let me tell you why this matters. And I think worst case scenario, people end up respecting you as a politician because you have the ability to do that. Best case scenario, you help people connect the dots, you change hearts and minds.
I don't have any data on this, but so let me say that first. But I think you said something there about respect. And one of the things I learned in running in such a conservative area, holding hundreds of town halls, welcoming everybody, is there's a big difference in politics when you're running as a Democrat in these difficult areas between stopping in at that diner, having a conversation, maybe not winning any of their votes, but if they can respect you, that is a totally different conversation than them just bashing you. And they might say, oh, he's a Democrat, but he has some decent ideas, or he's not a bad person,
Yep.
I have no data in that, but I just feel the difference. But you don't get that by just doing TV ads. You don't do that just by doing, like, you have to get out there and people have to know who you are. And so the bigger the race is, it's harder. And so one huge issue I have with Democrats right now, a lot of us running for federal office, you talk to donors and you talk to consultants more than you talk to voters. And that is absolutely wrong. And that's what we have to change.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly believe that. And it's refreshing to hear politicians say that. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
What's the most Iowa thing about you?
Anything above ketchup makes me sweat.
Damn, JD. Damn. We got to get you.
It's not for a lack of effort. It's not for a lack of effort. And like, I had the spicy thing. There's this place I love here in Sioux City, and there's a special dish there that I like, but it's spicy. I will not eat it at the restaurant, but I'll take it to go just so I can enjoy it. But I'm just sweating at home.
There you go. There you go. Okay. You got a little bit of the spice in you. That's good to hear. Your campaign should try to get you on a much more popular podcast / show called Hot Ones and see how you do as they escalate the hot sauce on that show.
I guarantee I will eat the first hot wing that's not even in sauce, and I'll start sweating.
It'll be good for your campaign, though. So maybe think about it. What is a major belief that you hold now that you didn't currently hold before? Another way to ask this question is, what's a belief you've changed your mind about?
Ooh. That's extremely tough. I struggle with, I think it's this. In politics, I think I mentioned it before, I think so much of us are trying to persuade the other side, and it's more persuading people to give a crap.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I see more and more. and in just everyday life, like a lot of the things I'm fighting for, I just remember going and having these conversations with my friends who are bartenders and work in the service industry here in Sioux City. And one of them was just like, yeah, and like was upset. And I was just like, and then I found out he's not even registered to vote. And like I've had deep conversations about what I'm doing and he's on board and all that. And I got him to volunteer for my campaign before he even registered to vote. And I was just shocked. But like then
Yeah.
you realize everyone, like at every event I talk to them about this because this is how meaningful it is. I go, I guarantee you have somebody in your daily life that is not planning to vote in 2026. And as much as we want to get that independent or Republican, that non-Democrat to vote, it's getting Democrats out to vote. That's what
Yeah.
we're failing at. And that's, I mean, that's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah. Yeah, I grew up in a political school of thought that was your chief goal ought to be convincing people in the middle to become Democrats and convincing Republicans that you're not so bad and maybe they can hold their nose and vote for you. I actually grew up believing that was smart political practice. And I have evolved, to my current position as we should be invested in getting everybody we can to vote for us, right? The moderate, the
Yeah.
disaffected Republican. But we should be more concerned about motivating them to want to change
Yeah.
the status quo,
Yeah.
motivating people to action. And I think that's part of the way you get away from these political barriers that say, well, I'm not voting for this person because they're a Democrat or a Republican. And you get to a place where people can say, I know that person, I respect them. There's a few things that I'm really excited about that they're talking about. Maybe there's a few things that I'm not so excited about, but I know that this person has helped me understand the stakes, has helped me understand my civic responsibility, has helped break down the barriers in my life so that I can participate in the great American democratic project. And so I'm co-signing. This is a long way of me co-signing, saying I think that our political approach needs to be less about convincing Republicans that we're cool and more about convincing people that they have an obligation to make their lives better and their fellow countrymen's lives better as well. They have an obligation to act and to be a part of this process.
Absolutely.
I think that's right. I think that's right. If you could pitch in a game against any historical figure, who would it be and why?
Ooh, I almost want to pitch against Barry Bonds just to see like how far you could hit it off me. I just like, yeah. I mean, I would love it. I'm a realist. I know I'm not going to strike out any historical figure. Maybe I can get him to hit a ground ball or a huge pop fly. But like, you kind of want to like when you have like like a Babe Ruth or a Mickey Mantle or a Barry Bonds, like just throw it down the middle and see like have at it.
Yeah.
Like let's see what you can do with this pitch.
I love that. I told you I didn't really grow up as a baseball fan, but I do remember Barry Bonds and Mark
Oh
McGwire.
yeah.
I do remember that whole, saga in sports history. It was fun to watch.
What he was able to do was so like even take away like the controversy with steroids or whatever, like his ability just to he would only get one or two balls to even hit the entire day and he did not miss on those balls. That's
Yeah.
insane. The best pitchers
It's
in the
impressive.
world and he
Yeah.
yeah.
That's impressive. This next one's kind of hard, especially knowing that you haven't had any time to look at these questions
Yeah, you're
or
good.
I haven't given you much of a heads up. But if you had to create a Mount Rushmore of TV shows, what are
Ooh.
the top 4 shows that are going on your Rushmore?
I mean, Seinfeld growing up taught me humor, and that was kind of everything. Um, Veep, I think is up
That's a good one.
there. I think it's absolutely hilarious, but I think it's also like the most realistic out of like it's somebody gave me this advice and said when I was running for Congress, they go, when you win, you'll spend the first like few months like, how did I get here? And then you spend the rest of your entire career like, how the hell did these people get in here? And I think Veep kind of shows that quite a bit. Man, I'm probably do like Baseball Tonight was very influential to me, even though
Okay.
I mean, it's a TV show, but like, and then Simpsons. Like Simpsons were
Nice.
so accurate. Like I love comedy, and
Hmm.
I try to add a little bit of comedy into things. Like that's I've gotten to be friends the past few years of a lot of stand-up comedians, both nationally and locally. And I tell them, you like your stump speech and holding a town hall is like your set. You have
Hmm.
your starter, you have your closer, and you have your three main points, but how you get there is different every single day. And I
Mm.
tend to start a lot of my town halls off with a joke to see where the crowd's feeling. Because
Hmm.
what I hate in politics is we have these events, and I'm not trying to bash any, because there's a lot of effort that goes into these events, but when you have speech after speech after speech after speech after speech after speech, it gets a lot. And so
Yeah.
anything we can do to break that. And so at the beginning of this year, when in early March, when everyone was saying, Democrats do something, here in Iowa, I felt there wasn't anybody really doing anything. So what I did was hold 3 events, one in Sioux City. It was all weekend. Friday was in Sioux City, Saturday, Des Moines, and Sunday was in Davenport, all at music venues. I would have a local activist lead, and then we had a musician. We had then an LGBTQ activist. We had a union activist. We'd have a second musician, and then I followed up. We had a poet at one. We had a comedian at another. Just and people walked away and they're like, "We needed this. Thank you." And
Yeah.
that's the type of stuff that I think we should be doing more of and engaging more. And then you bring people to, like I just put on social media, who is there a comedian, musician, anybody who's down to do an event? I had over 85 people respond all across the Iowa and just were down home. And people were upset, the ones who I didn't pick. And I
Yeah. I bet.
apologize for it. But like
Yeah.
that's the type of things we should be doing way more of.
Yeah.
And that's
I agree.
yeah.
I agree,
So
JD. I mean, I had a project when I was still in Iowa called Political Party Live.
mhm.
The whole idea was, can we make those traditional political spaces a little more interesting?
Yeah.
And how do we do it? It was with art. It was, we had a DJ at our events, we had poets, we had musicians. And then, somewhere in between all of that, you get an opportunity to talk about the things that really, we need to change. You
Yeah.
get to capture people's attention in that way. And so I applaud you. I applaud your work for that, because I think it's certainly something that we need, particularly in these times where it's just really tough to engage in our politics because everything's heavy, everything's serious, everything's tragic.
Yep.
So how do we come into community with one another in a way that's meaningful, in a way that's political, but in a way that fills your cup, instead
Exactly.
of feeling so distressed about the state of the world. So
Exactly.
kudos to you on that. We'll end with this question: who do you love the most and why?
Yeah, I'm not married, so the easy answer is not there for me. But ultimately, like my family, my parents have been so supportive of all my endeavors, whether it's baseball or politics. The person who's most influential to me, without a doubt, in my life was my grandma Fern. Just one of the most true Iowans. She was a fifth grade teacher her whole life, or most of her life. She was a farm wife, just active in her church, active in her community, just like one of those people, just pillars of their community type of people. And she wasn't political, but she's influenced just who I am, um, and like why I'm doing this for a lot of things. And I mentioned earlier, she on her deathbed said, "You got to take care of the farm," and that really, really just hit home. I gave the eulogy at her funeral, hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
Yeah.
And yeah, just she's like just extremely influential in my life.
Yeah. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I too, I believe in my life, the most influential person was my grandmother. So
Yeah.
it warms my heart to hear that. JD, you've been very generous with your time.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you coming on to this show. I appreciate the friendship we've been able to develop over the years. And I'm really, really glad that people like you are running for office. So thanks again for
Oh,
coming on the show. My best of luck to you. And please come back
oh,
and
absolutely.
talk to us, give us updates throughout this long campaign cycle that you're in. But with that, we can end it here. J.D. Scholten, candidate for United States Senate running against Joni Ernst. Thank you so much for joining us on Dispatch Revolution.
Thank you for doing this. This is great.